and welcome to the Merri-Cast, the show that puts you on the fast track to confidence in starting and growing your business. Karl Pontau is a quite remarkable man. He was already a remarkable teenager, having fought back from not one but two malignant brain tumours. He then showed the resilience, persistence, and inspiration to start his own art and digital creativity consultancy, Squash and Stretch Productions. And since January, he's been tapping into something that is nagging away at all of us in this tech, data, and AI-driven world. A podcast series of 100 interviews with business leaders and experts focusing on human connection. Now, human connection in Karl's world isn't just a warm and fuzzy concept, it's hard-baked in business value. So if your business's growth has stalled, employee churn is eating into your profits, or you're struggling with customer retention, it's probably because you need stronger networks and human connections. And so the Human Connection podcast that Karl has started is there to fix the fears that we have around the lack of human connection that many of us currently feel. And also an underlying cause of workplace and societal problems. But let's take a step back from all that first, though. Karl's early life was very normal until his early teenage years. But then things, as you'll hear, really changed. Let's hear him take up the story of what happened next.
I've been an artist my entire life. I grew up drawing, painting, sculpting, big Lego kid. And I got my passion for storytelling from my dad. He's a really good storyteller. And I knew I wanted to study animation when I saw the first Toy Story film. I was like, ooh, I gotta do that. That's so cool. And then beginning in 2002, I started to feel like something wasn't quite right with me physically. I'd been a competitive swimmer growing up, so I knew what I was supposed to feel like. And it wasn't like, oh, my shoulder kind of hurts. It was like a general blah feeling. But by August, they still hadn't figured out what was wrong with me. And I had lost 50 pounds, had sunken cheeks and eyes. I was really pale, started to get really bad headaches. So my parents took me for an MRI up in Walnut Creek, and we were waiting around for another appointment when my pediatrician called and said he's going to drive up from Pleasanton to come talk with us. We saw him walking up with this big envelope in his hands. You could tell he'd been crying, and he brought us into a little side meeting room. And I remember I was sitting knee to knee with him in this big U-shaped chair with really high armrests, kind of leaning forward towards him, when he pulled out the results of the MRI and said, "Karl, you have 2 brain tumors."
Oh.
And it felt like I got punched in the chest. I actually moved backwards in my chair. And for the next 2 weeks, everything sounded like the adults from Peanuts, like what, because I've never had the flu, never broken any major bones, never been stung by a bee. I'm pretty sure I've never been bitten by a mosquito. So to get brain tumor diagnosis at 15 years old was a complete sucker punch out of nowhere. But I got so much help from friends and family, and my high school adjusted my schedule, got me a tutor so I could still graduate on time, and people I barely knew were giving food and gifts and other support. So really inspired me to want to give back and help as many people as I could, because I'd probably be dead if it wasn't for all the help that I got. And then in undergraduate school, as I was studying animation, there was a big student digital art and design competition I participated in, with a big screening at the end of like 1,000 people in this big auditorium. I knew maybe 10 people in the room. But when everybody laughed at the joke of my animation, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so cool, and connect with people and have a bigger impact with animation and storytelling. And so after grad school, I was looking for work and I've been struggling to find jobs, but I figured I could start my own company called Squash and Stretch Productions. And so I ran that until 3 Februaries ago, when due to the economy and other factors, I was burnt out. It wasn't working. And so I had to pivot from that. And over the last few years, I've been figuring out a new path for myself and doing more consulting and freelancing work, and really focusing more on helping companies build stronger human-to-human connections with their clients and improve client retention. And so it's something that I feel is a lot more aligned with my personal brand and values and my skill set and my strengths based on what I've been through. But it took me going through starting my own business and having it not work out to learn a lot about the things that I'm now able to bring to clients today that I don't think I would have learned if I hadn't been through all that. Not just the business and it not working, but also the fallout from that, which is unfortunately what it often takes to learn these sort of valuable lessons where you have to go through.
Yeah. I mean, crikey, there's a lot to unpick there. So, I mean, let's just take some of those things in turn there. Obviously
Sure.
Your early traumatic experience with brain tumor, did it affect your psyche in the sense of attitude to risk? I mean, did it sort of accelerate you on the path to being an entrepreneur? Was
Yeah.
entrepreneur something that wasn't really on your mind straight away because you were sort of preoccupied with survival? I mean, what happened in terms of how that related to the entrepreneurial instinct?
Yeah, I mean, so it definitely got rid of that teenage invincibility complex most 15-year-old boys have, where they're like, oh, nothing can hurt me. I was like, oh, I'm mortal, crap. And it really put into perspective what's important in life and showed me I wanted to do something that was doing good for the world and not just creating content for content's sake. Like initially I thought I wanted to do like feature films or kind of entertainment animation. But when I was really thinking about like what do I care about and what sort of impact I want to have on the world, I realized that helping businesses better explain their value and connect with people was a lot more in alignment with what I'd find fulfilling rather than oh, I'm making a TV show, I'm making a movie. And a lot of that came from the experience I got from my friends and family and community supporting me when I was going through the chemo and radiation and all the surgeries and stuff for the brain tumors, which I got lucky in the sense of that my prognosis was very good. In fact, a couple weeks after the MRI, after I had the 7-hour biopsy surgery up in Sacramento, I was recovering in the ICU there, and a doctor came in with the biopsy results. And I remember he walked in my room and said, "You got the good type of cancer." And I was like, "What?" But I realized in a grand scheme of things, it could have been a lot worse. If you had to pick a type of brain tumor to get, you'd probably pick mine because it was really treatable and it's not coming back. It's not even a remission thing. So I got very lucky in that sense. But it still put into perspective like what's really important in life. And like you see people that complain like, oh, they got my coffee wrong at Starbucks. And it's like, if that's their biggest thing you have to complain about, you're so lucky and have no idea how fortunate you are. And so I wanted to find a career path that aligned with the sort of impact I want to have on the world. And at the time when I was graduating, I didn't really know how to find a job. I didn't really know how to network at that point. And I wanted to find a kind of animation work that would be fulfilling and helping people. And so starting my own business was a way for me to try and have that autonomy over who I worked with and the sort of content that I was making. And it was I mean, I definitely had no idea how hard it would be, how much work it would be to run a business and start it and all the other like behind the scenes stuff that besides doing the actual work you have to do to find clients and to bring in work. And so
To misquote
yeah,
Spider-Man, for example, with the great autonomy came great responsibility, if
yeah.
you like. So was that was maybe something you weren't bargaining for? Were there particular things that you found that found challenging was it what was it that challenged you?
I mean, I was warned by like some of my family members that like this is gonna be a lot of work and there's no real amount of words people can tell you to prepare you for how much work it's gonna be. It's kind of like when your mom says the stove's hot, don't touch it. You're like, how hot can it be? And you touch it, go, holy crap, that's really hot, that hurts. And so yeah, I was not I had to learn how to do a lot of like the bookkeeping and time management stuff and a lot of things that to improve my own skill set beyond the work that I was doing for clients. And that's not kind of what appealed to me because I love learning, I love growing, I love improving myself. I find that if I ever feel like I've stagnated or plateaued, I get kind of itchy because I want to find something, I want to keep learning and doing something better. And so as an entrepreneur, there's no shortage of skill sets to improve. And I know, and part of it, yeah, eventually I have to start delegating stuff. But if you're going to grow a business, you have to be prepared to grow as a person because you're leading that business. And if the leader's not growing, the company's not going to grow.
So how did you
Um,
grow then? I mean, in terms of you personally, sort of, did you feel yourself growing in particular areas through the dynamism of working as an entrepreneur?
So one of the most valuable things that I learned was how to network and how to introduce people, make referrals, and how to connect with people. And and an amazing coach. Her name's Miley Colmer. She runs the number one Ascentive franchise in the U.S. and was very fortunate to work with her and have her and be her friend, because she really showed me how to network in a way that actually builds trust and connection and connects people, and not just in a transactional way, but actually helps you really get to know people and what they're struggling with, and be that trusted advisor for them, or trusted connection. And especially these days when people feel more disconnected than ever, as an entrepreneur, it's a very isolating experience. So having people you can call on when you need advice, or you need just someone who can understand your situation, who's been there before, maybe just to vent that, and someone who understands the context of what you're dealing with, or knows someone who can help you with a challenge you're dealing with your business, or can refer you that next client you need to keep your schedule full, your cash flow working, that sort of stuff. That's incredibly valuable. And I think a lot of people, especially in the US, make the mistake of thinking that they have to do it all themselves, or they can do it all themselves. And if they ask for help, then they're weak, or they're not good enough. And that philosophy is incredibly destructive and dangerous, because no one achieves any sort of success that's worth caring about on their own. There's always other people that help them. And the more you're able to connect with people and add value and give, then you'll get what you need in return.
I'm really interested in what you're saying there, Carl, because you've got on one level, in order to survive as an entrepreneur and to thrive, you kind of need to make those connections and build that network. So did that come first? Was it like the survival interest, blimey, I need to talk to people in order to survive, and then the love of networking followed? Or did you instinctively love networking and that was your natural default thing to do?
What gives me the most joy about networking is when I connect to people and hear back, like the response back from, "Oh, we just met. That was so awesome. We're doing something really great together." Or I just referred someone for a service they need, and they ended up buying from the person I referred them to, and they're going to go off and do some cool stuff together. Like I connected two people a couple weeks ago, someone who'd been on my podcast, and I got a week later, I got a follow-up message on LinkedIn saying, like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much for that connection. We had like a soul sister moment where we're resonating, we're totally be working together." It was such a, and just that kind of, these two people probably would have never met if they hadn't made that connection, but it was such a meaningful thing that they wanted to share that with me, and that made me do a little happy dance in my chair. Or like earlier this week, I had a Zoom a call with someone who I'd referred to another connection of mine. She helps people build mastermind groups. And this guy was like, "Oh, I just got to have a meeting with her, and then we're going to be totally working together. And I'm super excited to turn my book into a mastermind group. And this is going to be so awesome for me and my own business. And thank you so much for connecting with me." And so she's super happy because she has a new client, and he's super happy because he's getting to do something that's going to help him grow his business. And they're both better off because I saw an opportunity to connect to people, and it took me 30 seconds to create the message that connected them. But that impact from that little gesture, and having the skill set and like the awareness to think, "Oh, these two should talk," it could have a huge ripple effect on the lives that they impact because of this one little gesture I made. And so I love that these small little connections and moments of thoughtfulness and giving that allow for transformational experiences for other people, and more good being done in the world is really exciting and fulfilling for me. And so that's what I love about it. And it does come back to that appreciation for those sort of connections, because a lot of the support that I got when I was going through the treatment for the brain tumors was from people that I hadn't really seen or met or heard from, like my parents' coworkers, or like friends of friends, and like neighbors and stuff that I'd kind of known at that point. But it was just the outpouring of support from people that really made it easier to get through that tough experience. To show me how these little acts, the little connections, little gestures can have a lot bigger impact on people's lives. And you never know what they're struggling with, but if you can do something good for someone else, it could be a huge result for not a whole lot of work on your end.
Yeah, and that's beautifully put, Carl, if I may say so, about those little acts, the thoughtful gestures. Yeah, you've mentioned this in the context. You've used the word connection quite a lot already, and and human and humanity, and it kind of leads us sort of neatly on to what you're doing right now. In terms of you've set up a podcast, the Human Connection podcast at the start of the year. I mean, I think the listener will probably get a good idea already about what inspired you to set that up. But what are you hoping to achieve through it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a stuff I've been talking about for way longer than 2025, but I launched it after seeing a few articles late last year about trends for 2025 being businesses are finally waking up to the fact they need to rebuild their brand relationships with customers and clients and employees and stuff, because for the past decade or two, companies have been so focused on like metrics and numbers and not really valuing brand relationships anymore. And the problem with that is that it leaves them very vulnerable to disruptions and to like the long-term growth potential is sacrificed in pursuit of just quarterly metrics and making the bottom line look good. And they keep trying to cut corners and speed things up and get things done quicker and quicker and quicker. And so I think they've kind of realized they've reached the limit to what's possible with that sort of model, and its non-sustainable nature is being revealed as these companies are vulnerable to all the disruptions going on in the marketplace, and there's no real brand loyalty for most of these companies anymore. And so, though I wanted to make a podcast, and I want to eventually turn it into a book that's like a compendium for businesses that are trying to scale, they're trying to grow, and they realize that to scale, they need to build stronger connections and brands and relationships with people on a human to human level, whether it's with their employees or their customers or their stakeholders. Because and the way I describe it is, for any business relationship to be successful, it needs two things. It needs mutual beneficial transactions, and it needs a personal connection. And it's like rebar and concrete. If you just have concrete without any rebar, it's going to crack and fade over time. If you just have a bunch of rebar sticking out of the ground, it's really hard to build on top of it without poking yourself in the butt. And a lot of companies right now have a bunch of rebar sticking out of a ground and are wondering why no one wants to sit on it.
How did we get here, Carl? I mean, how did we lose that human connection? Well, I mean, people
There's,
blame technology, people blame things like AI more latterly. I mean, but is it just like we got lazy? I mean, what happened? How did we lose that human connection?
I mean, there's no one single factor that contributed to it. I think a lot of it has to do with the way that companies incentivize their corporate leaders to based on like the metrics that the company is achieving every quarter for their bonuses. So they got like the executives got really focused on making the quarterly metrics look good. But when you just care about the metrics and not about the people behind the metrics or the people that are doing the actual work, it just dehumanizes the entire process. And so we've gotten so, and with like the explosion of like social media data and all like the data science that companies have collected, they get really enamored with their dashboards and their metrics and tracking those and making sure all those things are good. And if they're just focused on how to get the metrics higher on such a short-term focus, and they don't really think about the people involved, then they leads them to try and keep cutting more and more corners, or just like, oh, we need to make the books look good for this quarterly report. Let's lay off a bunch of people. And then suddenly the next quarter, they're wondering why like the business performance is tanking. Like I think it was like Spotify or some like company like the let go of like 1,000 people. And the next quarter, like the CEO said, man, our like the quality of our like the bunch more complaints, like the company's not running nearly as well as anymore. All these issues cropping up. And it's like, well, yeah, you just got rid of all the people that make the company work, and now you're wondering why the company's not working as well. But they wanted the quarterly metrics to look good that quarter, so that we need to cut costs and headcount is expensive. So
Okay,
just they'll just cut it there. But they were just looking at the numbers and thinking short term, and so they keep trying to cut all these corners and they dehumanize the customers, they dehumanize the employees, and it leads to this mindset of what we see now, where these companies are just trying to get things that like sales faster and this trying to make the books look good, but they're not really thinking long term. They're not thinking about the people as people, and they're now realizing that that mindset is killing the growth because it's always easier to retain clients and bring in new ones, or and it's a lot really expensive to keep having to rehire and retrain employees, or and if you let go of a bunch of people that have a lot of experience, then and just to hire new people that may be cheaper but don't know what they're doing, then your performance goes down, and just this cascading spiral of problems that has come to a head in the last year or so, and companies are like finally waking up that they need to rebuild human to human connections.
Now, I know listeners will be absolutely fascinated by this, and so let's just establish a few facts. So it's the Human Connection podcast. You're looking, I think, to interview around 100 people. I mean, you started it in January, and when do you hope
So
to finish it?
I don't know if I'd have to say quote unquote finish it, but so episode 33 dropped today as we're recording this. I've recorded like 65, 66 of them already. And so I want to eventually, I'll at least get to like 100 before I start putting the book together of like compendium of advice from people in marketing and branding and leadership and events and sales and all these things that businesses are doing, and they're kind of often neglecting the human element of all those different steps that a business needs to do to be successful. And the ones that, and there's plenty of like, it's not anything new that investing in these sorts of human to human connections and throughout the business make the business more successful. There's plenty of studies and data and just like kind of quarterly reports that show that companies that invest in these sorts of helping the people and like in their, whether it's their employees or being more like providing better customer experiences and leadership that is better at listening and giving their employees more autonomy. There's all, and like having events that are like in person and intimate and help people really feel like they're being heard by a business. There's all these ways that have been proven to help companies solve these problems and be more successful, get the numbers they want, get the profits and the growth that they're all chasing by first investing in the people.
So people can get hold of the podcast, on the usual channels like the Spotify's and the Apples.
Yeah,
and
it's
so
on Apple Podcasts and YouTube and Spotify right now.
Okay.
HumanConnectionPodcast.com has links to all those places.
Okay, so write that down, listeners, and because I know this is a brilliant project. I'm hoping to sneak in towards the end of this 100 sort of a list because we're due to speak soon on that. I want to get back to you had this with Squash and Stretch, as an entrepreneur and now a podcaster, soon to be author. When you're going to get all these podcasts together and so on. I mean, given all these experiences, I mean, what gave you confidence, for example, to launch the Human Connection podcast? We've talked a bit about the entrepreneurial side of things, but what made you want to do it? Was it the passion that drove you? A lot of people who set up businesses are driven by passion. Was that what it was for you in the first place? I'm just interested in that because that's part of what has helped you cope with challenges along the way, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, passion is, I think, a kind of a overused word for what it takes to be successful as an entrepreneur in any sort of venture, because to make it work, I mean, your passion might keep you going, but it's not going to get people to buy from you. You have to convert that passion into something of value for people and be able to explain that well. And so for me, I started the podcast and I because there was kind of the altruistic motivations and then the more self-serving motivations. Starting with altruism, like I've discussed, is I want to help have an impact on improving human to human connections in the world because of the whole brain tumor stuff we've covered. But also I launched it in a more self-serving way because I wanted a way to catalyze connection with people that cared about the same sort of things that I do and find more opportunities for the sort of people I want to work with or work for. And I've known from being on LinkedIn a long time that if you just reach out to someone saying, hey, let's talk, they assume you're gonna try and sell them something, or they're too busy. It's just that you're not really offering anything of value. You're actually asking them to give up some of their time for your attention. But when you approach them saying, "Hey, I'd be honored to have you on a podcast about here's what it's about. Let's talk and record the thing," that's offering them some value right away because you're giving them a chance to show their expertise, and it opens a lot more doors. And so it's a way for me to add value to these relationships I was trying to build, and help me really focus and strengthen my own personal brand. Because as much as I've been kind of talking the talk about caring about human connection with my work with like squash and stretch, I hadn't really been walking the walk when it comes to that topic as specifically as I am now. And ironically, walking the walk included talking about it more on a podcast. But anyway, so I found that it was a way for me to differentiate my personal brand more and help me refine my own messaging around what my strengths are. Because there's other consultants that do the same sort of work that I do, but my kind of unique value proposition lies in my understanding of human relationships and human behavior. And a lot of that came from the brain tumor stuff. A lot of that came from learning animation. And it comes to like body language and human behavior, because when you're animating a character, you have to know all those things to make the character act the way it should on screen. And so I had this, between the like formal schooling and running the business and the brain tumor stuff, I have this understanding and appreciation and skills at building human to human connections and being kind of that someone who can actively listens and help people be seen, heard, and understood, that helps companies convert that experience into content so they can provide that same sort of emotional experience to their audience at scale. And so I started the podcast because I realized that was a way for me to help more people get this word out about a cause I really care about, and also support my own transition from running my own, like my business, to being just like another freelance consultant, to someone who really is an advocate for human connection in business and in the world. Because the bigger kind of impact or ripple I want to make with my work is that if people learn how to be better connectors and human connectors in their business to make their business successful, you don't just turn that off when you go home. That sort of, those behaviors, that framework, those skills will translate into better relationships with family and friends and loved ones, and just make society better. And I think a lot of the issues we have in the world today and how divisive the world is comes down to the fact that people aren't good at building human relationships anymore. I think a lot of the social media, and especially the pandemic, didn't help, made people feel more isolated and disconnected, and forget that we have so much more in common with each other than we have different. And that learning how to, the audience I have for the podcast is motivated by helping their businesses succeed. And the key to solving their business problems is to reconnect with people on a more human to human level. And by doing that, they'll be better connected to people in their personal lives as well. And by helping them be more successful in business and making human connections, they'll be more effective at making human connections in their personal lives, and society as a whole will be improved when people are more connected on a deeper level, not just connected like in a Facebook, LinkedIn level. And that's the cause I'm really passionate about. But if I just went around talking about that, people go, okay, whatever. But by turning that passion into value for your business is something that the audience cares about. And so it's a kind of a way to get them what they care about, helping their business grow and be more successful. And by doing that, I get what I want to see happen in the world, which is more connection and less divisiveness and humanity as a whole. And so everyone wins. And so it's,
And
for entrepreneurs, it's that, how do you turn your passion into a mutually beneficial transaction with that connection aspect, that personal touch? Because that's what leads to the most fulfilling and most successful business or experience. And I think the most rewarding life that I could have is helping people and businesses succeed in a way that also benefits society as a whole.
well, Karl, I think that was so beautifully put. I mean, I found that very moving, the way you were talking about that, particularly the sort of holistic nature of what you're saying about, not, although you're expressing it in terms of business value, but you're also talking about friends, family, and loved ones all being in part of mix. I'm going to, as a final question, let's close the loop, back from Karl today to Karl back there, teenage Karl. What would you want to say to yourself, back to the teenage Karl, about about what advice would you be giving him? I mean, now that you know what you know, and now you're here and prospering.
Well, I mean, I definitely, it's one of the weird paradoxes that I learned a lot. I would do things a lot differently when I was starting squash and stretch with what I knew now versus what I knew then. And it's, I mean, I don't know. It's so hard to tell how I do things differently, or what I like. I think it shows one of the most important characteristics of being an entrepreneur is resilience, because especially after closing squash and stretch, I dealt with like serious depression, and was in a dark spot for a while. And so I knew the importance of asking for help, and I got the help, and so I'm doing much better now on that end. And actually, so when I closed squash and stretch, which is a little over 2 years ago now, I was like 100 or 246 pounds, and I weighed in at like 180 yesterday morning. So like I've been a lot more focused on my own health and my own like mental health, and because I definitely got out of whack and burnt out. So I think there's a lot of, I give myself warnings about some of the things that I did wrong that I think would have helped me avoid some of those problems. But again, I wouldn't have known to give that sort of advice if I hadn't necessarily like been through it myself. I think there's some things that you're gonna have to touch the flame to see how hot it is before you really learn how important that lesson is. But there are plenty of things that, I mean, getting the right sort of mentors and supportive team around you who can help you fill in the gaps of your own skill set or improve the skills you need is really important. And I think that it's very much about who you can go on the journey with that help you go a lot further. I can't remember the exact nature of the quote, but it's if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think it's like I want to say Maasai tribe quote, but it's like that's absolutely true. And so I would have focused more earlier on finding the right people to collaborate with, and to help me figure out my own positioning and brand, and help really align that, because that was one of my blind spots for a long time.
So, thank you to Karl for sharing your incredible story. I found that genuinely moving to hear Karl talk about his early fight against what was a near death experience, his resilient attitude to life since, and his evolution into an entrepreneur, connector, and soon to be author. His passion for human connection is clear in absolutely everything that he says, and I really think he's tapped into something here, with something we can all relate to. He's effectively a man in the right place at the right time, and we wish him well. So thank you to Karl, and thank you to our growing band of listeners. We love the human connection that we're making here too, and the great feedback that we're getting on the show. So do keep letting us know what you think in our LinkedIn posts. And if you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review through your podcast provider. And if you want to find out more about the Merri-Cast, look for me, Trevor Meriden, or our business Merriborn on merriborn.co.uk. Don't forget to join us for our next episode. But until then, thanks for listening.